In this episode, we take it outside of theory itself, and we spend a lot of time talking about how we approach this idea of sales individually. And it gets a little heated. So you're going to hear some argument between myself and Al and myself and Clint and myself and Nanette and everybody else, because that's what happens. You don't have to be like everybody else. So some things that I want you to take away. Think about how you process information. Think about how you think about what happens after a sales call. Are you thoughtful? Are you trying to refine, or are you just on to the next one? Take the time to figure out how you increase the percentages, because that's where all the process is. If you get any value out of this, please share it with someone else. Like us on all the social media, sign up for our email list, follow us on YouTube, sign up for the notifications. I hope you get a ton out of the show. It's the funnest one we've done so far, in my opinion.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. In the D corner, we have Clint the Cleaver Bigelow. In the I corner, we have Al the Gambler Daniel. In the S corner, we have Nan the Promoter Foreman. In the C corner, we have John Small Mountain Hill. Let's get ready to throw down!
Welcome to Sales Throwdown, everybody. We are here today to talk about sales processes versus sales methodology and what that looks like in the real world. But before we get started...
Hey, I got to interrupt you for just a second.
All right.
You used the word process, and sorry, guys, I sort of had one of those days where it seemed like everybody was annoying and in my way. And part of that really, apropos for what you're talking about, I'd love to stand 100 people up and ask them 5 fucking questions, right? And just show the world with a video camera how fucking crazy some of this shit is, right?
I love this.
And how... Because if I ask you a question, there's a process to answer, right?
Yeah.
There's an algorithm that you run through your head, right? And most people have no start, no stop, no end game, no beginning, and
no goals.
Yeah, and so go ahead from there. We'll figure it out.
Well, Nan had something.
I was just going to ask him to describe shit. Like, I wasn't sure.
Oh, oh, you called me to the carpet.
Shit means. All right, so let's get back on track. I love this idea, and I'll hold the camera whenever you want to go do this.
Man, we're going to do it.
I'll ask the questions.
So sales process versus sales methodology, right? They're not the same thing. And it's important to think about this because they're two different things, right? There's a ton of different sales methodologies out there, right? You know, things like challenger sale and spin selling and customer-centric sales and Sandler and, NEAT, and there's 500,000 of them. But that's great. That gives you a framework to go sell. What happens after that is on you as the salesperson, right? And I'm a process guy in general, right? I love processes, but the cool thing about what we're all doing here is we all have a process. We all have things that we've got to cover, and they're a little bit different. We all have objections that we're going to have to deal with, and how do we deal with that? How do we deal with people wasting our time and trying to get our information for free? And how do we move the conversation forward? So that's what we're here to talk about today. Because if you don't have a process, every sales conversation you have with a prospect is a unique individual event. And it leaves it open to miss stuff, not know that you're getting taken advantage of, not know that you're wasting your time or anything else. And so we're here today to talk about this idea because we're in drastically different industries, but we all have a process of how we get that prospect from a lead to them paying us, and it's different.
So we talked about the grocery store before, right? So if they hadn't heard that, go back to that episode. There's a methodology to most of the things that we do, or there isn't. And if there isn't, God, you suck, right? In most cases.
Yeah.
In medicine, there's an algorithm to just about everything. Now, not that you have I'm stumbling. What that helps with, you don't have to get out of the zone. It limits the options because you're right here and you follow a path that takes you to the end, and then you have the win.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, pilots, right? They before they fly away and take off, they've got a checklist. And the guy who implemented that checklist, there was an immediate drop in casualties and wrecks and deaths, right? Just by having a checklist. So if you're not taking that into your conversations, you're leaving so much value and opportunity on the ground.
And let me add to this. So a jet takes off from New York going to London, right, to Heathrow. The checklist starts at the beginning, but halfway through, they're checking to make sure they're where they should be, right?
Absolutely.
And so you don't just put it on autopilot and end up in Heathrow, right? You got crosswinds, you got events that occur, you got some stalling. The the end game is, how do I get to my destination? And so many people think they deserve, expect more, but their process isn't there. How did they get there? This whole wish and hope, and go buy a lottery ticket at that point, because you're doing about the same thing.
So yesterday I was talking to a pilot, and he was talking about how he, just his whole process. So a few minutes ago, you mentioned the grocery store. We all we don't all fly a plane, but we do all go to the grocery store. And do you go to and so often it's frustrating. You'll go to the grocery store and you'll see people just like, and not to say that the people that are wandering around the grocery just haphazardly, they have no idea what they're even, they don't have a plan. It's okay, but you've got to have a plan. So that's what you're saying. I think to identify everybody, no matter if you're going to the grocery or you're doing your job, you're raising your family, whatever, you need to have an idea of what your next step is. Have steps.
For sure.
So I'm going to interject a little bit and say that everybody has a process. You may not know that you have a process, right? It may not be an efficient one, but if you are a traditional salesperson and you think that taking somebody out to a baseball game and that's the way you win them over so that they buy from you, that's a process. It's not an efficient one.
Correct. Yeah.
Most people don't even know that they have one. What we're implementing in our own lives and our own sales is a process to make whatever we're doing more efficient. And you build on that. You fail, you succeed, you take your successes, you write that down, you take your failures, you write that down, and you take all those things and you build on a process.
So let me take that one step further. Like we talked about leaving New York going to Heathrow, there are inflection points. So there's the meeting the gatekeeper.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go? And you have these inflection points, and then you grade yourself, or you check to make sure that you got everything covered.
I mean, hopefully, right? I mean, but think about how many people. Okay, so to your earlier point, there is a subsection of people that are following a process and not even realize that they're doing it because they're just autopiloting. And those people, I mean, God help them, right? But you probably have enough ego that you don't care, right? You get to know.
Some people are going to be okay with that. They're going to succeed.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're not where,
right?
They're these prodigies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They can't figure out what they said 2 seconds ago, but they still get it done.
Mm-hmm.
That's that outlier.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of us have to have something that tells us, are we going the right direction or are we going the wrong direction?
Exactly. And that's why the D with the I is so valued as a salesperson, right? Because the D is going to be so task driven and you don't really care what people think, that you're just going to keep hammering calls and eventually you're going to see success because you're just consistent, right? That doesn't work for me as a C, right? I need a process, right? And that's why I like martial arts, right? It is a process for fighting, right? And that I try to process everything, because then that means I don't have to recreate the wheel each time I want to go do these things, right? I have the same breakfast pretty much every morning that I'm home. Right?
Boring.
I know it is boring, but you know what? It's one less decision I have to make.
I was making love with you.
Amazing.
About like eating his breakfast.
Do you give a manual before you go into the program?
So here are my expectations. No.
What are yours?
But the other side of that is that some people just get there just by pure consistency, right? You don't realize that you're getting improvement, right? And you could shortcut that learning curve, right? We're talking about how most people go out and they hire a salesperson, and it's like you either get it or you don't. You sink or swim, and if you don't make it, we'll screw
we'll
off.
Find another one.
Exactly. We'll bring someone else in,
mm-hmm.
and it's not great for anybody involved, but it's just how everybody does it, unfortunately. But for me, the minute I realized, oh, I can just run a process, I can just run my game as long as I figure out what that game is and what I need to cover, my life as a salesperson changed completely.
Often, I think there are people out there right now listening, and the process they think is you're going to bring in lunch. How many offices? It's like that is not a process. That's you think you're wooing the person. All you're doing is feeding the office. You're not wooing them. That is not a process. That is not something I think we're talking about.
And I was going to throw in as well that even if you have a process, you're still going to get no's. But if your process allows you to see that no coming and get to it quickly, then you move on. It's a numbers game, guys. Not everybody's going to buy from you. And I know you guys have heard that before. But in your process, when you start to see a no, go for it. Get that no and get them gone. Get your ass out of that office and into another one.
Yeah.
And then start to recognize where you're gaining ground, traction, interest, and working towards a yes.
Absolutely.
There's a keyword in there that really resonates with me as a high D is efficiency. All a process is to me is to gain efficiency of why I'm doing what I'm doing and how to do it the easiest way, least path of resistance, and do it as many times as I can and refine it along the way. So even though I'm going to get a few no's, what I don't have in my process is 100 no's. I may have 4 or 5 no's, let's say out of 10, and that's okay. But what I don't have is 100 no's out of, let's say, 110 prospects.
Each defeat sharpens you, so it's okay to get a no. It's actually advantageous to get a no.
But only if you can stamp down your ego enough and look for that period of refinement.
But
or that
Clint
point of
just
refinement.
looked. So, Clint, what went through your mind when Nan said it's okay to get all those no's?
Well, it is okay to get a no. I agree with you, Nan, on that. But those no's,
That would be Nanette to you, sir.
Miss Nanette, it is okay to get a no. What I like to do in my process is that when I get a no, that's a very small percentage of the people I'm dealing with.
They're usually afraid to say no to you.
Like,
Well,
he's
that's
gonna
their
kill
problem,
me.
not mine. No, so if I deal with 10 people on a regular basis, let's just say I'm shooting for 10 people, and I get 1 or 2 no's out of that, I expect that. What I don't expect is 9 or 10 no's, right? Because that would mean my process is weak.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If I get 1 or 2 no's, that tells me my process is strong. Okay, so if we go back to hit ratios all the time. Hit ratios for me, if you're not in the 50% plus range, you have improvement to do.
Okay, but that may be just your industry specific, right? Because I know there are industries out there that they run through a lot of no's to get a yes, and that yes means a lot to them.
I think it depends.
I think that's a cop out.
I kind of agree with you, honestly. Now, so
what if I'm in phone sales, right?
but here's the deal, right? If you look at some of the best performing sales teams in the world, right? It's things like Salesforce and HubSpot and these like tech companies, because they are so data driven, and they were kind of the leaders in making
marketing strategies.
Well, really just taking this thing of sales and taking it outside of the realm of I feel like I'm pretty good and I close everybody that I sit across from, which is nonsense. And they started to add data to it. And so then what they said is, look, everyone's got to cover the same information. Everyone needs to be talking about A, B, and C, and D on the first call.
Sure.
And then second call is E, F, G, or whatever it is. And so then what happens is when you have enough data, you can then look for correlations and look for like periods of improvement. Yeah. And what happens is you have to have enough, what's the word I'm looking for? Process, right? For lack of a better term, to go through that work, because otherwise you're just this guy who puts it all on the prospect. Screw that prospect.
Well, let me ask you a question though.
Yeah.
How many people? How many of you guys do an analytical analysis of every sales call that you do?
Every time.
Okay, I was guessing that.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I mean, you know,
do you think
that's
I
going to
do
be
that?
yes. Absolutely not.
Do you think I'm fairly successful?
Of course you are.
Okay. I have a process. I just don't have any data.
Absolutely.
Hold on though. The analytical data between
my
you
bank
two,
account. Sorry, I do have data.
That's what I'm. But great insight.
It is a great insight.
Yes,
Great
that is,
insight.
I agree.
Because
That's very good.
because we talk about a lot. Success in sales is measured by exactly that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I will say that you.
And Bill Gates just laughed.
Yeah,
I said money. Sorry, just giving that disclaimer.
But Al,
I love you, Bill.
I think that we would compliment each other on this. That in our heads we have data, right? We don't write it down. We don't put it in a spreadsheet. We may not put it in a CRM management tool. In our heads, we know what works. We know what doesn't. We can do that. For John, very, I'll say analytical. We say that a lot, but you write that down. You need record. You need data retention. You need all these things to go back on the history side of it. But everybody does that. It just may be in your head or on paper.
Well, here's the deal. I think that if you don't write it down, and if you don't have a way of...
It doesn't exist.
Well, I don't know that I'd go that far, but if you don't write it down or have it actually someplace else other than your head, it morphs, it changes, right? Because here's the deal. This is what I do in my business is I help people create these sales processes for themselves, and then I map that to a CRM so that way it makes sense. But every person I sit down with, at least initially, is like, oh, I close everyone that I sit down across from. And it's like,
oh, really?
Liar, pants on fire.
We need that on paper.
Yeah, congratulations on having a free product, and I still don't believe you.
I agree with them.
Yeah.
What? Do you close everyone you sit down from?
No,
but
that's a falsity.
You got to get it out of your head, and you got to give it to someone who is going to do that work, right? Because it's easy to tell yourself whatever you want. Like, look at, it's not that far from debt, right? Like personal debt. I mean, everyone has got a little bit of debt. And so you have these people and they're underwater and they have no idea even how much money they owe because it's so much easier to just say,
bury your head.
Stick your head.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I'm making the payment.
Absolutely. So if you are not being...
We said that like we know this. Oh, that was bad.
We're old. We're geriatrics.
If you're not tracking things, right? If you're not actually measuring, it's open to interpretation, right? And that's a problem at scale.
Well, tracking itself is a process.
Absolutely.
So that let's go back to the basics of what a process is for your sales cycle.
Mm-hmm.
For people listening out there that maybe have no idea what we're even talking about, because that's a possibility. Myself included, I'll go back quite a few years and say that I had no process. And the process that I even had, let's say 6 months ago, is different than the process that I have today because it's growing.
Mm-hmm.
So recognizing strengths, weaknesses is the beginning portion of a process.
For sure. That's why we're here.
Well, okay, so let me back up. So you said it's refining, and some people out there may be thinking, well,
better
oh my
word
God.
than growing.
Well, that there's something wrong with that. But what happens is you run a $30 million portfolio, right?
Correct.
And so as you get those projects up and running, you have more irons in the fire. So it has to evolve, right? Mm-hmm. So that you can do more, make more, and have a better living, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what I bring
so success makes you change,
Absolutely.
predicated on the fact you got to manage more crap. You got more income.
Well, as a matter of fact, I had a conversation today with my boss about, okay, we killed it this year. We're planning for next year. We killed it this year. What are we going to do? We got big shoes to fill here, buddy. That's tough for me because now it's like, okay, I have a process that was meant to get us here. Now I don't have a process to grow.
Yeah.
Now that's another cycle. That's another add-on. And you cannot do that if you don't refine the one that you have. Mm-hmm. That's daily growth. You can do that daily, monthly,
except
quarterly.
When you're that sales guy that has a service team behind them, right? It's not responsible because you know there's the sales process where it's I sold you, now I dump you off, and I don't mean that in a bad way. There's just another group that does the rest of the work.
If that's how it's built, and
that's a great job to have if you have that. What I'm saying is a lot of times, like you're in construction, so you have to see that project because I know you have to fly out and solve problems and do those kind of things. In healthcare, we live in the same arena, right? Where once we take it on, now it's a service project. I sold it, now I got to service it. And so there's different selling cycles, there's different selling processes depending on what your product is and where you're going. But I guess the crux of what this is you have to be your own manager. You have to hold your you roll your eyes. Why?
Well, I was marinating. I don't disagree with you, right? But like you need to have someone that is holding you accountable. Right? Because it's really hard to hold accountable to yourself, right? Because most people are terrible about goal setting. So if you're terrible about goal setting and terrible about planning, right? Because we're also not great at planning, just like as a culture, then all of a sudden you're, things are great and I'm good. And
I think that's what we're trying to create here, though, is creating the want to plan.
Absolutely.
I think it's really vital.
What do you mean, accountability or planning or
The process. What is the?
I think it's different for everybody, right? Because here's the deal, right? In y'all's industry, which I worked in, if you're not familiar with that, go back and listen to the earlier episodes.
Mhm.
You guys don't got to talk about money with the doctors.
But money is time and resources.
Absolutely, right?
So there's still a budget process there.
For sure, right? You got to talk about, one of the things, but in most other instances,
Money's everything. Mine
right?
is.
In his world, it's everything.
I think it's easier.
What,
I
to
really,
not talk
you
about
either have it or you don't.
The grass
You're
is
either
always greener.
lying to me or you're not.
the grass is always greener.
I disagree. I mean, we'll
You're
have to
alone.
leave it at that.
But I have to talk about money because, as we talked about, no one wakes up in the morning and they're like, you know what, I need to hire someone to come in and document a sales process and customize my CRM. So
Okay.
so if I don't draw really good awareness around these potential gaps in your business, my budget conversation is going to be terrible. It's going to be really, really badly.
I can't believe I'm about to say this, but let me rein this back on track. I like this.
It's never happened before.
It doesn't. So our topic today is process. Do you have one? What is it? Can you refine it? Is it buildable? Is it realistic? John, talk a little bit about your process. What you go through daily. Why you have one? What is it?
Thank you, Clint.
Good job. Yeah, thank you. For me, there's a couple things that I got to talk about with like each one. Is first of all, I got to get past the ego, right? Like salespeople are just inherently ego-driven people. You have to be, right? To show up in someone's office and say, you should pay me to do this thing that you shouldn't be doing, or fire the guy you're currently working with and hire me to do this, requires a little bit of ego. It's just the fact of the matter. So I got to get past that. I have to get sales leaders, or business owners and salespeople to admit to the fact that it could be better as a salesperson. And that's really, really difficult, because if I don't get to that, everything else is a non-starter, right? Like, we're not going to get to have a good conversation. And I got to talk about money. And I have to do that. I got to figure out how you get to yes, right? We talk about this, covering for the things that could blow up later on, right? Because if you don't have a process, right? Because I've had so many conversations, I know the typical questions that I should be asked. And if I know the typical questions that are going to be asked, I also understand the questions that are way out of left field. And then I can figure out, why are you asking me this question right now? Why is this important? Do you have an expectation we should talk about? Because if so, I'd love to hear it. Or are you trying to waste my time?
So part of your biggest, one of your biggest tools in your process is digging for information.
Well, yeah, but that's me generally, right? I will ask questions until
That's what he needs.
until the cows come home, because it's kind of my middle name, right? John, ask a lot of questions.
So how does that work when you are trying that process against somebody that doesn't want to give you information?
So you and I have had this conversation a couple of times, right? Because
Sure.
we have role played some of these conversations, and that's kind of where this came from.
Segue.
Yeah.
If you're not role playing some of this stuff,
You're failing.
And everybody hates it.
Everybody
I
hates
have
it.
talked to Nan. You're not a big fan of role playing.
I'm not
Right.
either.
I love it now. Thank you.
I don't believe it
look,
with that tone.
Look, I'm still uncomfortable with it. I'm still to this day. I don't like it. What I will tell you is that if you role play for 20 minutes and you pick up 30 seconds of a nugget that might help you out,
Agreed.
Absolutely.
it's
Agreed.
worth every minute that you spend in it.
And it's not you talking to a mirror. It's you talking to somebody else
You need
that's
another person.
lobbing a
That's true.
curveball
Yeah.
or just answering correctly.
Yeah.
Look, let
And your big pet peeve about this, if I can put this out there, is that people don't make it realistic.
They don't make it
They
realistic.
either make it really, really hard, or they give
Yep.
you all softballs.
So
which
so
isn't really
people
relevant.
so people have a tendency to, for example, if I talk to a buddy of mine that I grew up with, I talk a certain way, right? And then I pick up a phone, or people pick up phones to make a sales call. They instantly change their tonality.
Oh,
They
yeah.
instantly change their way of speaking. They do all these things because traditional sales have taught us that we have to be this way. It's called the phone
Yeah.
voice, right?
Oh yeah.
yeah.
How's
So,
your day?
hey, how was your day today? Right? So it's unnatural and it doesn't sound great. Yeah, sure. 1-800-CLINT.
I heard those were 900 numbers, not 800 numbers.
they were
Just heard that
876
today. Actually, I
numbers.
did.
So
900, not 800.
you know, with that saying is that it's really hard to role play and be yourself because usually the person that you're role playing with is not in your industry or they're a different personality. But the point of it is don't worry about that, right?
Reps.
Get rid of that. Worry about yourself and what is, see their reactions, see their body positioning, see their language, their matching and marrying, see all that stuff of what they're doing to you, because it doesn't matter what industry they're in or how monotone you get or they get. What you're doing is, like John said, you're getting in reps. You're repeating things that, so when you say it for real, it comes natural, right? You can't do that if you never practice.
True.
Here's what you really should do. That one click where they hung up on you, call them again.
Oh, yeah.
And
Hey,
again and again.
We just got disconnected. Is everything okay?
Yeah. Sorry, was there a problem here?
It's great for your soul.
Let them just absolutely, right? Because you're not getting it, right?
Make it a game.
Something you've written off.
So what
go back and go back and go back till they threaten to sue you.
What the guys, Dr. Daniel. Okay, so what I believe you're talking about is creating a habit. If you can't just naturally do something, it's like Doc is getting ready to do a marathon, and he's talking about, well, I'm going to run this many miles for this long, and
I have some guy doing it for me.
Are you really going to do a marathon?
I've done some.
This was
I know. Sorry,
Oh.
I'm
trying to do
this
it
is off
again.
topic, but I'm curious.
Trying to do it.
We'll talk offline.
Only if I can go 3:10 or less, so I can.
He's
go to Boston.
training me to run it for him, which is really weird. But I'm in.
That's the only way it's probably going to happen. But anyway.
Oh,
so,
bitches, you're on. And not you, not specific to Nan. I
That
just say
was
that
rude.
sometimes when I get
I don't
called
know,
out.
has anyone ever called me that? That's
No,
so rude.
sorry.
I have
Okay,
it behind
so-
your back.
I wasn't directed at you, Nan.
So all I'm saying is, I think what we're all talking about is you have to create a habit, and doing the whole role play with someone to create that habit, because you're not going to create a habit by just thinking, I think I'm going to do this. You got to do it. There's got to be some action. It is not a fact of just thinking it in your head. You've got to role play. You've got to actually run the mile to get to the marathon. Dr.
Well,
Daniel.
it's the martial arts and the military conversation,
Same
all
thing.
or metaphor, right? Like in martial arts, you're supposed to be training something over and over and over and over again until it's muscle memory, and you can do it without thinking about it, right? If you're saying something for the very first time in front of a prospect, you're wrong.
No, not if you've
I disagree.
thrown that as just going to the shooting range, right? That you're not really in combat, or you're training. This is my training, and this is my live episode. It's your way of muscle memory, right?
Mhm,
But
right.
neural pathways is what these are called.
Sure.
Right? So that you
Actually
evoke a
real, right?
response.
Yeah.
And we have that. It's already built into your system. You don't have to invent this. You were born with this. You have, if my hand touches a hot stove, I pull it off pretty damn quickly, right? And I
Absolutely.
don't really think about that.
Mhm.
So that's a shorter pathway than going to the cortex. But what can happen is, how we all have automatic reactions that kind of annoy us a little bit, that we automatically leash out, that it's a trigger, right?
Yeah.
I get a trigger. You need a sales trigger that gives a response because you saw it coming, or you felt it coming, and it was a natural response to a particular situation. And you only get these things by repetition.
I think we're saying the same thing.
We are
Yeah.
in different ways.
And I think we brought this up earlier in one of the other episodes, but I remember whenever I was training someone and they called me and they were like, I
Love this story.
I cannot get out of the car. I cannot hear another no, another just degrading, office person saying, yeah, we don't need you. Like, please go.
They didn't want to buy any Viagra.
And
I told you to never share this story with anybody else.
No, we don't
And so,
want
anyway,
a hard erection.
So all I'm saying is that person today, after it takes 30 days, supposedly, to create a new habit. So let's say if that's true, you have to do it. You have to fail. Maybe you won't fail if you're Clint, but you go and you do it. Just keep doing it eventually, and so I'm trying to meet the marathon man over here. And so I'm just getting out there and, if I run 10 steps, I'm out of breath, but I'm like, all right, tomorrow I'll run 15. So my point being, the girl that wouldn't get out of the car to go into the office to call on the doctor, I was like, just get out of the car, baby. Just get out of the car. And she did it. And now she's very
I was
successful
gonna say,
because
she kills it now.
she's doing great because she created a good habit. And so I feel like what we're talking about, the thing I always say to my kids is, they'll call me with an issue, and I'm like, well, it's an elephant. Start eating it, and you can't eat that puppy in one meal. You're gonna take one bite, chew it, swallow it, be done, and then move on. You've got to each day create a good habit. So
let's
that's
do
what we're talking about.
let's do a personality check, right? Clint is our D. If someone calls you and says, "Hey, I can't get out of the car and I can't take another no," what do you tell them?
Oh dear.
Get the fuck out of the
There we
car.
go. Al,
Go.
I'm going to have some sympathy for it because I felt that early on. My first question is, or not question, first thing is I'm like, yes, you can get out and you can take one more. They're not reaching off across the counter. They're not slapping you. They're not physically assaulting you. You're a good person. Build your confidence and go in expecting them to say no, wanting them to say no.
Yeah,
so that when they say it, you're like, that's what I was hoping for. Thank you very much.
I didn't know we were going to be insightful. Can I go back?
oh, don't get sensitive now. I'm that guy, right? Quit stealing my thunder, Clint.
the I spot is already taken,
Go
sir.
ahead.
Exactly.
Go ahead, move on to
No,
S.
exactly. Because he's like,
Well,
I love that guy, man. He's like,
We already know how Nan would respond because she just told us, right? It's
That's
it's
true.
love and
Yep.
nurture, and you absolutely can. If you call me and you say, "Hey, I can't get out of the car," the answer is honestly, what are you scared of? Like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? And I do this with my daughter who's 7, and she hates it all the time. She's like, "You're going to ask me what's the worst that can happen?" Yeah, it's the truth. Because that's my thing, right? And Clint and I had a conversation the other day that because we're task driven, we look for the negative, right? And it was a very insightful conversation because I thought I was alone in this, right? But we were having this conversation, and I look for the bad so that way I can improve it. And Clint kind of voiced the same thing, right, Clint?
Yeah, most people don't do that. Most people take their strengths and run with them, right? So most people look at all their successes and their past successes and they say, okay, this is what I'm good with. I'm good at this, so I need to dive into that. Doc, you talk about this quite a bit. Like, if you're good at that, run with it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't think that way. It's not a majority of the population. Some of us look backwards into the past and say, okay, I've failed at this and this and this. How do I improve all of these things to go forward? I know you shake your head. That in a negative way, that is, some of the population think that way, right? So that correlates pretty well with how your sales process goes, because if you only dived into the successes, eventually I think those are going to dwindle and run out at some point.
Or you're just complacent.
Well, yes,
Which is
complacent's a great
limiting
word for
yourself.
it. Some of those negatives build that successful process.
Mm-hmm. Because Al is a bit of an outlier as far as the I goes because he can flip to that D so easily because
Agreed.
he's been in business for so long.
Sure.
The average I struggles a lot more with this kind of stuff because they've got such a compulsive need to be liked. I can't ask that hard question because then you might not like me.
But also self-reflection,
What do
right?
you mean?
So they have a hard time going back on themselves
for sure.
to dig into the negative side.
Well, that's
right?
the gut driven side of things. I didn't mess up, right?
Agreed.
if you're in sales and you don't have somebody you can talk to about your sales process, you're missing a lot of things that would be so much easier. Because these little squirrels start running in our heads on the positive and the negative, right?
I think that person is outside your company, by the way.
It should be probably.
Why should it be?
Because
I'm genuinely curious.
Because you're just not going to get real answers.
I don't think you
unless I'm your boss
or a different perspective, right?
I think you might not get real answers if you go to your immediate boss or supervisor or whatever
That's
else,
what I'm saying.
or the sales manager, right? Because we talked about the fact that like most companies just promote the highest performing sales rep, and that's not great for management.
I think it should be. I think it can be a colleague. It has to be an equal business stature colleague. I think that's a point. I find way more intellectual conversations happen outside of my own workplace.
I got something for you. How about your competitor, the guy selling?
I have some great conversations there.
Yeah. I talk to the guys that directly sell against me.
I do too.
Because they're guys that they're like me. I like them. They're not bad cats. Some of them are dicks, but most of them are decent people out there hustling like I am. There's a broad enough market.
But man, what you can learn from them.
Oh, and they learn from you. And once you find that right guy or gal, you're going to find somebody that calls you and says, "Hey, I got this account. Do you know anything about it? First of all,
Mhm.
is it yours? Am I competing against you? No, but I know a little bit about that account. So if it's not on my call list, or even if it is, I'd like to know, because he's going to try to help me. I'm going to try to help him, right?
So in my world, the way that I've always looked at
John's like, fuck that.
no, I don't disagree with you, but what if you're not in a flooded industry?
Well, what do you mean by flooded industry? Like you're
Man,
the lone,
so-
you're the only guy that sells that?
No, I'm not saying that, but I can remember clear as day. I went into a doctor's office when I was working for you. They hadn't even opened yet, and this woman was already furious with this idea that I was in there, and I was like, I feel like you're kind of angry. She's like, you know how many people like you I've talked to, and we're not even open yet? I said, how many? She said 36 in 3 days. So you've got people all over the
You
place.
kept a log of people that came in. I mean, come on.
I don't know. I mean, it could have been 3, and she was just a terrible person. But for me, when I'm looking for an accountability person, it's someone who has got a genuine interest in seeing me succeed.
I didn't say the gatekeeper. I said people in your industry.
No, I know. But what I'm saying is that because
Other salesmen.
medical device salespeople,
people.
right? There's tons of them,
Yeah.
right? There's a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's what everybody
there's
hopes to grow up and be.
There's a ton of consultants, right? Which is great. I can go talk to them about different things, but there's not really anyone that I know who's selling it the same way that I sell it, which might be
They
me
don't have
feeding
to
myself.
sell it the way you sell it. They have to be in the same arena to where you can look at them and
Disagree.
say, "Oh, okay."
So let's get back to what a process is.
Yeah, because we got way off task. Man, Clint is playing my role today.
I am. So looking at you, Nanette.
Yes, sir. You can actually call me Nan. I don't really care.
Nope, it's
No,
too
no.
late.
I was just being silly.
I have calculated and changed.
Oh Lord, I should have.
So Miss Nanette, your process. What is your first step in your process?
Action. I just really. I plan.
Is that like a jumping jack, or is that a push up?
So let me back up a little bit, because if you plan, that's kind of more your first step, right? What are you planning for? Are you planning for getting to know somebody on a personal level, on a professional level, on a technical level? What is your driver? What do you do?
What is the office? What do they? What I want to know what is going to be successful. I don't want to just haphazardly walk in there. I want to know what are they going to need, and then
So you're doing some research.
research.
How do you do that research?
Well, finding out about if it's a surgeon, what kind of surgeon he is, what kind of products he's using, and then I'm going to go in, and my biggest thing is I am going to be persistent. I think it's really important to not just go in there haphazardly and thinking I'm going to win this office. Well, you're not always going to win.
Okay. So you've done some upfront research before you walk in the door.
Correct.
I think that's a really, I do that as well. I think we would all have done a little
Absolutely.
bit.
Dr. Daniel, do you do that?
Sure.
Yeah. Even if it's a quick,
Sorry, he said sure so dismissively.
Well,
Like-
No, I mean, you have the internet. There's just
Yeah.
so much information. There's too much information.
But I
you can
think
get
that-
bogged down in getting information. That's why I went sure.
But
right.
see, Doc is a relationship builder. He's a relationship guy. He's going to make some phone calls to ask if somebody else knows about this guy.
I
in an
don't. Yeah, I
industry.
don't cold call. I
Right.
warm call or I
would
no
love-
call. Right?
I would love to see the split on how much of Al's business is referral versus like
Sure.
he initiated the conversation.
Sure. I think the point of it is that what
if
Nan-
you drink enough, you're going to run into a lot of people that you sell to, right?
Hey,
Okay,
it's,
but-
hey, it's not a
Clint?
problem if you're networking.
I agree.
Yeah,
No
Betty
ar-
Ford.
no.
I don't need her. She's not buying anything.
No argument here.
Okay, back to you, Clint.
So
Thanks, Dan. Keep us on task.
So I think that you have some preparation, and I do that as well.
Well, if there's not any opportunity, I mean, you need to identify that.
But not everybody thinks like that, right? So some people think they can go knock on a door,
Or
walk
pitch anybody.
and pitch anybody, walk in, I can sell. It doesn't matter. I'm a salesperson. I sell widgets. I can sell these widgets to anybody. People believe that.
That's silly. That's that is the sales
It's-
rep
You know
that
what's funny?
does lunch after lunch after lunch, and
listen.
nobody cares.
They're out there doing it every single day, right? So if for example, if we can take that person that does that, sells widgets, think they can sell it to anybody, takes people to lunch, waiting for one to hit. if you can take 20 minutes of research on a LinkedIn account, on a social media, internet search, and deduct a lot of things that you don't have to talk about, you've just increased your sales goal, your process. You've made it more efficient.
Al is shaking his head over here. I'm really curious to hear how Al views this idea.
I think that you romper roomed, and I think the people that listen do all that already. I really think they do.
Elaborate.
No, I didn't.
I need you to elaborate what
yeah.
you're talking about.
I didn't.
You didn't do what? You didn't. You just described what you do.
I'm saying before that I had a process. I thought you just met people and you ran with it.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Well, for example, if I went to a conference, I thought that the goal of mine was to walk around, collect business cards, give them a call a week later, and say, "Hey, buddy, remember our conversation? Are you going to do business with me?"
Okay.
That's a pretty standard cycle for most business people, I think, in my industry.
Okay.
I don't do that anymore. I've already done homework to who's going to be at the conference. I have pinpoints of people that I want to go see and why I want to go see them, and I narrowed down all the hard work.
So
that's a process.
So then
sure.
at your
It is a process.
conferences, they list everybody that's going to attend.
Yeah, and
How do you
most
get
do.
that information?
Most do.
I know some of them do.
So when you pay for a conference, they're going to give you a list of vendors and exhibitors, and they're going to
sure.
give you
I get
attendees.
that too. Sure.
Not everybody gives attendees, but they're going to give you a list of exhibitors. So if you have 1,000 exhibitors at a medical
Sure.
conference,
Oh
you
no! I'm with
Right.
you there.
so maybe you want to talk to
I
25
kind of know
of them.
the answers. I'm just
Right.
asking you the
So
question.
so maybe you want to talk to 25 of them. Don't go to the conference blind and walk around the room trying to find 25 that you might want to talk to. Go with the intent to talk to 25 people, and whatever happens after the 25 people is
Gravy.
gravy. It's a bystander.
Because if you're good at what you do, those 25 will say, "Not me, but go talk to Tom over here."
Exactly.
They're going to say,
Yeah,
"I'm not the
hopefully.
guy, but somebody else is."
But look, I'm talking about the very beginning slice of a process.
So
true.
back to what I was saying. I think it's really important to investigate the studying. There's a million ways to do it. We'll talk about that some future podcast. But I think what I'm trying to find is what I'm going to give them, what they need, not what I'm going to get from them. Because I think if your intent is you're just going to go in going, oh gosh, how am I going to make? You need to know what they need. There has to be a need, or don't go in wasting your time, because everyone doesn't have a need. So to what Clint was saying, you can't. Everyone doesn't need you. That's
I kind of agree and I kind of disagree.
okay.
Right.
Disagree. Talk about
Because in my world, I spend a lot of time having a lot of conversations, right, and networking and just kind of getting the word out and stuff like that. And I have to draw awareness around potential pain points. And if I don't do a good job of that, the conversation never segues. So if I don't do a good job of illuminating potential gaps and things like that, no one wants to follow up. And then they say, "Okay, awesome. I appreciate the coffee. If I think of anybody, I will
There's your problem.
I will send them your way." So I'd had enough of those conversations. So then I said, okay, how can I up my game on this thing? And so then I started to do a little bit of research beforehand, right? I will look at a prospect's LinkedIn. And if you're paying for Navigator, you can see all their connections. So we have our coffee. I try to draw some pain points there. If you don't have anything, okay, awesome. And as opposed to just saying what everybody normally does is, do you know anyone I should be talking to? And they say, I can't think of anybody right now, but I'll call you if I do. I say, okay, awesome. I try to say, hey, do you know anyone who's struggling with these things? And they say no. Okay, well, before we met today, I took a look at your LinkedIn. I saw a couple of connections who look like someone that I should be talking to. How well do you know them? Because I'm just trying to increase my percentages. So I'll take a meeting with pretty much anyone who will sit still long enough to have a conversation with me, because my business is new and, I like networking and making introductions. But if I have a process to make sure that I've got the highest batting percentage possible. Does that make sense?
And I want everybody to hear what just happened, right? You guys went through the conversation of, I disagree. This is what people need. This is what sales is lacking.
Exactly.
You're out on an island. This is the conversation that makes you better, because she gleaned something, you explain something, you defend your process, if she can, she should turn around and shoot holes through it. And
So-
you just said something really important, was that once I build that rapport, that may not be my target. So I get past, I accept that this isn't it.
Mhm.
And then I inquire because I've looked and I've done my homework. That seems quite reasonable to me. And that's what you need to glean. That
Well, the other thing is that Nan is very different from me and
Agreed.
how we approach our conversations and everything else. Because I had spent enough time drinking coffee with people and not getting anything out of it, I finally got mad and was like, you know what? Screw this. I've got to figure out if I'm going to spend this time networking and putting out the
if
work.
I'm spending $1.50, shit, it should mean something.
I don't know where you're drinking coffee, but all my coffees are more expensive than that, right? And
Oh, believe
here's the
me,
thing.
I don't drink coffee, and yes, it is more expensive.
when it comes to networking, like that's part of the tax. If I invite someone else out to coffee, I'm buying your coffee, right? So it's always like $4 or $5 or $6.
High roll.
What? It's not about high rolling. It's about
on me.
So-
hey, I invited you. Why would I not pay?
Absolutely. You know me.
I know,
agree.
right?
If you
So-
invite somebody, bitch, pull out the wallet. We're not splitting. You're called
Yeah.
them, so pay for it.
There was one week, and I'm on the board of a local networking group, and I had spent, I think it was 10 hours of the week networking. And I followed everything up with the lame version of my initial process. Do you know anyone I should be talking to? And they were like, no. I'm like, okay. And so then at the end of the week, I was like, man, I haven't done shit this week. I have nothing to show for this time except for making asks and getting no's. How can I look at this thing and improve it? And so
Mhm.
that's when the LinkedIn thing came in, right?
I
So I
like
do a lot of LinkedIn research, right? Because I'd rather do that than cold call.
Sure.
And that's just how I view things. Nan's different, and that's okay, right? Because my process doesn't have to make sense for Nan, right? Even if we were in the same industry, it doesn't have to be the same process. But you got to be following something to cover for the things that you know that are going to come up, so that way you're prepared.
But there's a common link here that says that when you reach out to your client, however you get to the sit down, that there's a bigger picture here, that they know other people and that other salespeople know other people. And so if you're not networking, if you're not expanding the people that you could potentially talk to, and maybe this doesn't make sense to Clint. I mean, you're kind of okay.
Clint does a ton of networking.
Oh, I thought it did, but he was kind of
So basically, I think the bottom line is, do not, when we were talking about creating habits, role playing, you have to have another person. Everything we're talking about is we're all different. Y'all are all different. There's different processes. You need to look at this, listen to this, figure out where you are in this dynamic. But don't think you're doing this alone, because you can't be successful and do everything alone. You have to reach out, either listen to this, reach out to other people to role play with. I mean, there's so many.
But I've got a challenge for the average listener out there, for the salesperson that's out there in the day-to-day grind. You woke up this morning, you did something. You woke up, you got dressed, you
Maybe
got
not.
coffee.
We're going
Maybe you didn't, and that's why you're failing, right? Because that happens.
right.
You're so fearful of what the day brings
It's hard
that
to
you
get out of
can't get
bed.
out of bed.
Yeah.
So if you got out of bed, you put your shoes on, put your pants on, like every single person out there does, right? I mean, seriously, that's a big revelation to some people.
Mm-hmm.
That guy sitting at the top of a big Fortune 500 company put his pants on too, just like you did.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't
So-
hire that out?
Maybe, maybe, but we're not dealing with that guy. But you did a process, right? So you woke up, you did something, you went to work, you did something. You had to have done something, otherwise you just don't have a job, right? You got through the day, you went home. Snapshot your day. Write that down on a piece of paper. That is your process.
For sure. Yeah.
So now take that process. What's your weaknesses? What's your strengths?
Improve
And
it.
maybe you
Create
need
a new
help with
habit.
that. That's great. That's what coaches are for. That's what life coaches are for. That's what friends are for. That's what people in this industry to bounce ideas off of. That's what networking does. It gives you outlets to go take your process and say, this is what I do. What do you do different than what I do? And how does that work for you? How does it not work? Maybe I can help you versus you help me.
So as a D, right?
That's not easy.
Okay. So speak to that a little bit more, because as a D, being gut driven and task driven, and you
Sure.
know,
I can measure it up with one word. It's called success. If I'm not successful, then I need help.
how do you measure that? Is it money in the bank? Is it your hit ratio?
Hit ratio equals money.
Okay.
Right?
Agreed.
So if my hit ratio is good, because I think I spoke to this a little bit in the past, if I'm failing, if my hit ratio is less than 10%, I would call that an ultimate failure. If my hit ratio is less than 10%, I need help. Or I need to get the hell out of this game, right?
But your industry is different, right? So
we can talk about industry all day long, but
no,
hold on.
This is super important though, right? Because of how you guys work. If you have 10 really good partners, you're set, right?
Until I maximize that potential.
Or
And
until
then I need 11.
until your quota goes up through the roof, right?
Yeah.
But my industry is different than that. So I'm gonna
But hold on, your process is adjusted to what your industry is.
well, your expectation is adjusted,
Okay.
right?
But the point of it is that if you're in one industry and I'm in another, your success is measured on different wavelengths.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you're measuring your success on the wavelength of the industry that you're in and you're failing, you need to relook at your process. And you need help.
I agree with you, but I'm kind
wait
of
a second.
hold
I
on.
cannot pay an electric bill with attaboys.
Hold
It
on,
is
hold on, hold on.
dollars and freaking cents. guys.
Agreed.
I'm backing up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I understand this point that we're making, but I'm trying to illuminate it for people that are listening. So, if you are in a very high volume transactional sale, you might have lower than a 10% ratio. That doesn't mean that you're bad.
No,
Right?
I agree. I
Right?
said that
So
early on.
if you're listening to this and you think like Clint, and Clint really just speaks to you, don't take this idea that if you're closing less than 10% of everyone you talk to, that you should like quit sales.
Well, let me tell you why personally I believe that that's a failure, right? Because 51% to me is a win. It's a win.
I love that as a gambler.
Right. So 51%.
Bring it.
but-
Vegas, 51%. I own the town.
So the point of it is that in my personality spectrum, who I am as a person, 51% to me means I'm winning, right? I hold the vote. I'm there. I've accomplished the majority. Now, even though me personally, I get 51%, I'm still shooting for 100. I'm still going to shoot for 100.
By contrast, though, hold on real quick. In Al's industry, you only need one good doctor, one good surgeon who's doing a lot of cases and is using you a lot of stuff, and you're going to be fine. You're going to be
Agreed.
successful. You got a good.
I'm not
business.
saying that 9% is a failure for everybody. In my world, 9% is a failure.
Okay. See that kind of
So you just
thing
need to
is important.
identify your.
What
Right.
success means.
absolutely right,
so-
and that's part of the algorithm.
Look, I say this over and over. If you make 1,000,000 cold calls and you close one person, are you not a success? It's not efficient. It's not the
not
best way to do
scalable.
it.
Yeah,
it's
for
not
sure.
scalable. You can't do all those things, but you're still sold. So you're a successful salesperson.
Okay, but if you are like, I know a guy that was in oil and gas, and if you sell a Saudi oil contract, guess what? You get to retire,
Agreed.
right?
Yeah,
You know?
Sure.
If
Maybe
the guy
that's your
has
goal.
Sultan behind his name, you're done.
that's why the process is so
Agreed.
important. And one of the things that I love that Al talks about all the time is you work with the end in mind,
Yeah.
right? Because if you don't have a plan
I
and
didn't
you
make
don't
that up.
have, I know you didn't, but you say it all the time,
I do
and
think
and
that's really.
I think
good.
about it when I think about that term, I think about you, and it's so relevant because if you don't do that, you're just stuck in I need more,
Well,
more.
okay, but in healthcare, here's what happens: greed gets you thrown in jail, right? Because you break the bond of trust because we have third party payers,
Mhm.
right? This isn't 7-Eleven; it's $1.98 for the cup of coffee, right? It is one person with a problem and another person who pays, which is your insurance company.
Yeah.
So there are rules and regs, and there are people who attempt shortcuts all the time, and that works for a little while. Then greed gets in the way, and next thing you know, people are going to jail. And
That was the thing that eventually ran me out of that industry.
Look,
Right.
that happens in all industries, right?
Doesn't
There's
happen.
underhanded deals, there's brown bag money changing hands to make sure you buy from this guy. You're going to run into those.
absolutely.
That's going to happen.
Yeah.
What I would suggest
disagree,
hold
though.
on. So I
In
suggest
every industry, that's such
yes,
a blanket.
100%. You can, if there's ever sales, there's backdoor people that work around sales.
Okay, are you
to make deals
including
happen.
kind of like referral agreements and things like that?
No, what I'm talking about is that some people buy from some people because they got paid to buy from some people. I think that happens across every industry. But don't get hung up on that because those are
Don't be
1%ers.
butthurt. That happened. Okay.
It's not
I'm-
about being butthurt, but
I'm
I
saying
don't-
that those
I don't
are
buy business.
so a lot of people. So in my industry,
Because you
None of
can,
us do.
obviously.
but look, guys, in
If you
my
could. Huh?
Okay, I mean, but
if you could.
I'm racking my brain trying to think of a time.
No,
that
get
I
your
bought
wallet
business.
out, man.
In my construction industry, of all industries, that's probably where it's known the most that happens.
Oh, I think it happens way more in the medical world than it does in construction.
Maybe. Same.
Sorry.
Okay, so
that was soap, man.
Castor oil?
So here's what happens with that though. A lot of people get tied up on the fact that, well, I can't win that guy because he gets paid. Right. He gets paid on the table and I can't pay him under the table. That's not my process.
Mhm.
My point of it is that's probably a small majority. Don't get hung up on that.
Okay.
Put that in your process as a lose-lose. Find people that do business the way that you do.
Exactly. The industry standard, stay
in your lane.
Paint between the lines. Because, you're just getting out in the weeds, and that'll come back to bite you in the ass.
It is way better during arbitration to be the guy on the good side that was honest.
Absolutely. And when you're sitting in a court of law, that's why I say think with the end in mind. Where will this ultimately land you?
Yeah.
And I always say there's
Is
a
it worth it?
million.
Because
Is it worth
that
it,
$2,000 cash in a brown bag is not worth it.
And you
No,
can't
it's
consistently repeat that. That is
You
not a
can't.
repeatable
Because-
process.
You want to talk about not scalable?
Because
it isn't.
it's
It isn't.
$2,000 today. It's $4,000 tomorrow.
I mean,
and then it's $20,000 to
Absolutely.
keep your mouth shut.
Sure.
It never ends.
It doesn't.
Don't even. Yeah.
Don't go there.
I will say, winding this down, right?
Yeah,
we
gotta wrap
We're
up.
talking about process. I challenge you personally, myself, to write down what you do on a day-to-day, improve, see your failures, see your successes, and if you add some improvement every day, just a skosh, just a
Create.
little bit.
Skosh.
That's a good word, right?
I love that word, actually.
Create a good habit.
Just a little bit to improve from Monday to Tuesday, and Tuesday to Wednesday, and Wednesday to Wednesday,
It will pay
and
off.
then August to September. That is a process. That is a process that you can improve on and build on.
And I go to say, no man is an island, but to thy own self be true. And I say that because we live in
He just wanted to
communities.
say it.
I love it.
We,
I've heard him
I
say
do
that.
too.
we live in communities
Trust
for a
and so
reason.
on.
We need each other. I don't want to make my electricity. I don't want to pump my own water. I like the fact that I cut the switch on and lights appear. So build a network that helps support that idea that you don't do it alone.
Well, it
Absolutely.
supports your process.
Right. And you support theirs. You to give to get you got to
Dude,
give.
I will say this on every podcast until it becomes very apparent that you are needed. If you're selling something, you are needed.
On both sides of the fence.
That's what I'm saying.
right. Your
Right.
company needs you, and your prospects need you.
Yeah,
Right.
And we talked about the mindset, right? And it's so important. If you don't feel like you deserve to talk to the president of a company or the owner or the
So
founder,
true.
You've already
So true.
lost.
you've already lost. Absolutely, right? And that's so important. And that was one of the hardest things for me to wrap my head
Sure
around.
it is. That's
'Cause
the hardest part for most of us up here. Even as a D, it's hard for me.
That's interesting to me because I would not think that.
I can tell you why, because I don't want to be embarrassed.
You know, when
Oh.
I've said this before, but it's so true. I remember whenever I first started calling on surgeons. I think I said it last podcast. You know, you're like, oh my gosh, he's a surgeon,
Well, this guy knows everything.
and you know, you just think they're just so amazing. They are amazing, but that's their gift that they get to. They learned how to do that. You learn. You
Let me-
have gifts too. Like,
Can
don't
I put that in perspective just a little bit?
absolutely.
If a guy can tear apart a Harley all the way down to the jets of a carburetor and put it back and
There we
rebuild
go.
it, is that not the same as somebody repairing a hip inside of a
Well,
body?
it's not the same, but the thing is
But what I'm
that
saying is
there's
that certain people have
skill.
skills to do
That's-
certain
there we go.
things.
We both said it.
So you're a hero in your own industry.
Everyone has skills. Don't discount who you are. You know, just they've learned a different skill. Your skill is identify it.
Here's
Yeah.
here's what I do know about process. If you don't have one, you can't track what you're doing.
For sure.
I do know that.
Let me add to this. You also need to be a superhero. You do need to be bulletproof. You do need to be able to leap over.
That's pretty easy for me.
Okay, but
It's actually easy for
Nan is,
me too.
I've seen Nan be a superhero in the healthcare side of things, where people come to her, they gravitate towards her. If you're not building a dynamic along with that process,
Mhm.
because if you're vanilla ice cream, guess what? Somebody's pouring
delicious.
hot chocolate over you and putting bananas
That's
next to you.
That's
and,
a really
you know,
good analogy.
you know,
like
and,
that.
and
I like
there-
that one.
so at a certain point, you need to be a little more. You got to figure out how to stretch yourself and get out there. Right?
And again, you have to be uncomfortable to succeed. Eventually, you won't be uncomfortable, but you need to not be afraid of that.
Absolutely. Anybody else, guys, before we wrap up?
I mean,
this was an awesome episode. I'm pretty excited about this.
I know
we got a little heated.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well,
I mean,
all right. Well, let's listen back and see before you throw out how awesome it was.
Hey.
Let's see what the response is, right?
Absolutely. So, with that being said, right, if you're listening to this, if you got anything out of it, or if you know anyone in sales, if you know that they're struggling, send this to them. If you got anything out of it, imagine how much someone else who's not as far as you on the path could get from this. Inspect what you expect, right? That's not my line. I learned it from someone else, but I love it. If you're not thinking about what you should be expecting from a sales call, you're winging it. Don't do that. Hope is not a sales strategy. So follow us on social media at Sales Throwdown is everything. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. Go subscribe. Get on the email list. We're doing some crazy stuff on there. And
comment. Let's hear that stuff.
Give us an honest review. If you think this sucks, tell us.
Yeah. Ask questions. We want to.
Absolutely.
Totally
right. We want to do Q&As. Like, we want to help you, right? If you see value.
And we want you to help us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've learned a lot from the other people at this table. And honestly, you know, I kind of felt like I had it all figured out for a while. I don't, but it's all good.
You're so far from that.
Absolutely. All right. So before we go off on a tangent, thanks everybody. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Somebody pass gas.
Yeah. Always
It was you.
Always you.